The 1st of September, 1939. Nazi Germany invades Poland, which marks the beginning of the Second World War. After defeating the Polish army, the Germans ruthlessly suppressed the Poles, whom they considered to be racially inferior. And in the weeks following the German attack on Poland, German SS, police, and military units shoot thousands of Polish civilians, including many members of the Polish nobility, clergy, and intelligentsia. The Nazis seek to destroy Polish culture and the Polish nation, and eliminate any resistance by arresting and murdering Poles. The Germans mean for Poland to be an endless supply of slave labor, and a site for the mass extermination of the European Jewry. On the 2nd of September 1939, the Nazis set up the first German concentration camp outside German borders in World War II. The camp's name is Stutthof, and one of its most infamous guards will become Jenny-Wanda Barkmann. Jenny-Wanda Barkmann was born on the 30th of May 1922 in Hamburg, then part of the Weimar Republic, which was the name given to the government of Germany from 1918 to 1933. Barkmann's family was poor. Jenny's father worked as a dock worker, and her mother was a housewife. As a child, Jenny was no different from other girls her age. She played with dolls for hours and dreamed of becoming a famous actress or model one day. Barkmann was only 10 years old when Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power in January 1933. As Hitler rose to power, Nazi propaganda became inescapable in Germany. Josef Goebbels, the head of the new propaganda ministry, created a cult of personality that glorified Hitler as Germany's infallible savior. Nazi propaganda dominated the press, film, radio, and public spaces. Portraits or statues of Hitler appeared everywhere, and every city and town renamed a street or public space to honor him. In public, Germans were expected to praise Hitler and give the so-called German greeting, Heil Hitler. Propaganda permeated school curricula as well, and schools played an important role in spreading Nazi ideas to German youth. From their first days at school, German children were imbued with a cult of Adolf Hitler, and his portrait was a standard fixture in all classrooms. While censors removed some books from the classroom, German educators introduced new textbooks that taught students love for Hitler, obedience to state authority, militarism, racism, and anti-Semitism. Jenny, who grew up in an evangelical family, was also influenced by Nazi ideology, and when she finished elementary school, she started working in a pastry shop. Jenny-Wanda Barkmann was 17 years old when the Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939. The same month, the Germans established the Stutthof camp in a wooded area west of Stutthof, a town about 22 miles east of Gdańsk, today's Gdańsk in Poland. The original camp, known as the Old Camp, was surrounded by barbed wire fences and 8 barracks for the inmates built by prisoners in 1940. The camp was established in connection with the ethnic cleansing project that included the liquidation of Polish elites, such as members of the intelligentsia, as well as religious and political leaders. Even before the war, the Germans had created lists of people to be arrested, and the Nazi authorities were secretly reviewing suitable places to set up concentration camps in their area. Originally, Stutthof was a civilian internment camp under the Gdańsk police chief before its subsequent massive expansion. In November 1941, it became a labor education camp for political prisoners and persons accused of violating labor discipline, administered by the SD, the German security police. Finally, in January 1942, Stutthof became a regular concentration camp under the jurisdiction of the SS. In 1943, the camp was enlarged, and a new camp was constructed alongside the earlier one. It contained 30 new barracks and was surrounded by electrified barbed wire fences. A crematorium and gas chamber were added in 1943, just in time to start mass executions when Stutthof was included in the final solution in June 1944. The maximum capacity of the gas chamber was 150 people per execution. Eventually, the Stutthof camp system became a vast network of forced labor camps. 105 Stutthof subcamps were established throughout northern and central German-occupied Poland. Tens of thousands of people, perhaps as many as 100,000, were deported to the Stutthof camp. The prisoners were mainly non-Jewish Poles. Conditions in the camp were brutal. Many prisoners died in typhus epidemics that swept the camp in the winter of 1942 and again in 1944. Those whom the SS guards judged too weak or sick to work were gassed in the gas chamber. Gassing with Zyklon B gas began in June 1944. 4,000 prisoners, including Jewish women and children, were killed in a gas chamber before the evacuation of the camp. Camp doctors also killed sick or injured prisoners in the infirmary with lethal injections of phenol. More than 60,000 people died in Stutthof concentration camp and its subcamps. The camp staff consisted of SS guards and, after 1943, Ukrainian auxiliaries. Some sources claim that when Jenny-Wanda Barkmann became a guard at Stutthof in January 1944, she was the mother of a child that was born out of wedlock. The child's father was a German soldier, and it was Jenny's mother who took care of the child while Jenny served as a guard at Stutthof. Barkmann later recalled that during a 10-day training course for female concentration camp supervisors, the SS captain who supervised the course told his trainees, "Don't feel sorry for the prisoners, they are Slavs." Before she became a guard, Barkmann hoped to use her beauty to become a model. Because of the combination of her attractiveness and her cruelty, the prisoners nicknamed her the Beautiful Spectre. The others called her simply Mad Jenny. She brutalized prisoners and was known for beating inmates, some to death, either with her bare hands or with her whip. Among her victims were also children. She would not only beat them, but together with their mothers, she would select them and then send them to the gas chamber. One of Barkmann's favorite methods for torturing the female prisoners was to beat them with a stick or thong. Later she confessed, "We in the SS used to hold specially long open-air roll calls in the winter so that the female prisoners would freeze, and indeed, many of them died. We were dressed warmly, so we endured the harsh frosts." Though she worked in the camp for a short time, the prisoners remembered her well. Former Stutthof prisoner Maria Zhenberg testified that she saw Barkmann beating the female prisoners while they were bathing. Another Stutthof survivor named Sawicka recalled, "I once asked her if I could take a potato lying on the floor of the barn with me. I should add that she was off duty that day. In response, she hit me in the face with her hand and beat me over the head with a stick." She also beat into unconsciousness my friend Yuta, who wanted to take some potatoes from the basement. Yuta died the next day. There were hundreds of such examples. During a typhus epidemic in 1944, which reached its peak in December that year, the number of victims equaled 9% of the total prison population. Barkmann recalled, "Before the typhus epidemic, in the part of the camp where I worked, about 15 to 40 women died every day. Later, there were so many corpses that the crematorium couldn't keep up, and the corpses were burnt on piles." The evacuation of prisoners from the Stutthof camp system in northern Poland began in January 1945. When the final evacuation began, there were nearly 50,000 prisoners in the Stutthof camp system, the overwhelming majority of them Jews. About 5,000 prisoners from the Stutthof subcamps were marched to the Baltic Sea coast, forced into the water, and machine-gunned. The rest of the prisoners were marched in the direction of Lauenburg in eastern Germany, but after they were cut off by advancing Soviet forces, the Germans forced the surviving prisoners back to Stutthof. Marching in severe winter conditions and treated brutally by the SS guards, thousands died during the march. In late April 1945, the remaining prisoners were removed from Stutthof by sea, since Stutthof was completely encircled by Soviet forces. Again, hundreds of prisoners were forced into the sea and shot. It has been estimated that over 25,000 prisoners, 1 in 2, died during the evacuation from Stutthof and its subcamps. When Soviet forces liberated Stutthof on the 9th of May 1945, they found only about 100 prisoners who had managed to hide during the final evacuation of the camp. Altogether, some 100,000 prisoners passed through Stutthof, 60,000 of them perished, while another 22,000 were transferred to other concentration camps. Barkmann had already fled Stutthof in January 1945 and was in hiding for 4 months. In the last phase of the fight for Gdańsk, Barkmann tried to escape from the advancing Soviet troops, but she was eventually arrested by the Polish militia in May 1945 at the Gdańsk railway station. At the first interrogation, Jenny stated that she had always treated Jews well and had never bullied prisoners. She also said that she had secretly helped the unfortunate prisoners and even saved them from death. However, her lies did not help her escape justice. Barkmann was tried at the First Stutthof Trial, which began on the 25th of April, 1946. Though dozens of survivors of Stutthof testified against her in court, Barkmann, not particularly worried about life, was rather concerned about her appearance. When the survivors described the brutal atrocities she had committed, even Barkmann's defense attorney admitted she was guilty, but argued that it was because she was mentally ill, saying that no one sane could commit such atrocities as she did. Nevertheless, Barkmann wore stylish clothes and a different hairstyle every day, and reportedly flirted with the prison guards. Barkmann and her former female colleagues were also said to have behaved insolently, giggling and joking during the proceedings. When the trial ended on the 31st of May, 1946, 11 defendants, convicted of crimes against humanity, were sentenced to death by hanging. Among them were 5 women. While 4 of them, Wanda Klaff, Gerda Steinhoff, Elisabeth Becker, and Eva Paradis cried and pleaded for their life, only one, Jenny-Wanda Barkmann, who celebrated her 24th birthday the day before, remained calm. After being found guilty, she did not beg for forgiveness, nor shed tears or show remorse. She only remarked, "Life is indeed a pleasure, and pleasures are usually short." Her execution was held publicly and became a theater of horror, which was recorded by official press photographers. After World War II, only 3 public executions of war criminals were carried out in Poland. One of them took place at Biskupia Górka Hill near Gdańsk, former Danzig. When on the 4th of July, 1946, the 11 Nazi criminals from the Stutthof concentration camp, including the 24-year-old Jenny-Wanda Barkmann, were hanged from the gallows, 200,000 people were watching. On that day, Biskupia Górka Hill experienced a real siege. 3 days earlier, the newspaper had reported the date of the execution. Workplaces announced a day off and provided employees with transport to the event. Everyone could come to witness the execution. The security forces feared that a lynching might occur at any moment, and the militia and army had difficulty controlling the huge crowd. The 4th of July was very warm. The sun was shining. Punctually at 5 p.m., 11 open trucks brought the prisoners to the execution ground, their hands and legs tied with cords. On the platform of each of the 11 trucks stood a convict, 6 men and 5 women in total. The trucks were backed under the gallows, and the condemned made to stand on the tailboards or on the chairs on which they had been sitting. Former Stutthof prisoners, dressed in striped uniforms, volunteered to serve as executioners and put a simple cord noose around the convicts' necks. The execution was planned in such a way that after each truck would be driven forward, the 11 convicts were left suspended, and their bodies would not fall from too great a height. As a result, the nooses did not break their necks and did not cause an instant death. This short drop method of hanging resulted in a torturous death by strangulation of each of the criminals, lasting anywhere from 10 to 20 long minutes. When the driver of the first truck carrying Johann Pauls, the former commandant of the guards in Stutthof, started the engine and moved slowly forward, Pauls, before sliding off the platform and hanging from the rope, managed to shout "Heil Hitler." He was answered by the insults of the crowd. As Paul's body went still, another truck started moving, and another criminal began what those present at the execution described as a rope dance. As each truck moved forward, the other convicts had the opportunity to take a good look at what awaited them in the next few moments. When one truck driver failed to start the engine several times, the former Stutthof prisoner pushed the convict off the platform. The crowd waved, and the people shouted, "For our husbands, for our children." When the last convict died, the security forces allowed the crowd to the gallows. People ripped off buttons, cut off pieces of fabric, and kicked and smashed the corpses. The gathered people were then chased away, and the bodies were removed from the gallows. There were also some unfortunate side effects of this theater of horror. Some children started hanging their toys, and there were some cases in which one child hanged another after seeing a public hanging. After the execution, it was rumored that once Barkmann's body was cremated, her ashes were taken to Hamburg and dumped into the toilet of the apartment where she had been born. However, this was not true. Instead, the bodies of those executed were taken to the Medical University of Gdańsk to be used as a teaching aid in anatomy classes. There were no tears shed for Jenny-Wanda Barkmann.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.